HarperCollins presents Africonomics, A History of Western Ignorance by Bronwen Everill, read by Patricia Rodriguez. For JG, my IR. You Europeans, we fear you. If it pleases you, you will help a man. If it doesn't please you, you give no one help, and no man can tell when it may please you. Eleanor Smith Bowen, Return to Laughter, 1954. Introduction. I was getting a lift back to Roberts International Airport in Liberia. It was the end of 2008. And I had just finished a term spent digging through archives. I had been searching for material for the PhD I was writing on the history of Liberia and its neighbor in West Africa, Sierra Leone. A Liberian friend was giving me a ride. As a recent returnee from the United States himself, he had heard my accent and had helped me out when I first arrived, allowing me to tag along to parties. He introduced me to well-connected friends with family archives stretching back to the 19th century, and others who might know where to look for documents in the National Archives. Making conversation as we drove out of Monrovia and the flat, green countryside opened up in front of us, he asked what I made of the two places I had been researching. So, what are the big differences you've seen between Sierra Leone and Liberia? My research was really focused on the early 19th century, the foundation of anti-slavery colonies for formerly enslaved people, and early Back to Africa movements. But I'd walked around both countries having conversations with people, and had been struck by some differences. For example, football was the sport I saw played everywhere in Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown, in the streets and on the beach and in the National Stadium, while in Liberia's capital city, Monrovia, there were a large number of busy concrete basketball courts, a difference that might be explained by the British and American origins of the two former colonies. A more serious difference was the scale of the presence of international aid workers and advisors in the two countries. There were plenty in Freetown, to be sure, but Monrovia was on another level. Sierra Leone's decade-long civil war had ended 6 years earlier, in 2002. Liberia's civil wars, which had begun in 1980, had ended in 2003, and its first post-conflict elections took place in 2005. The reconstruction in the two countries was unfolding differently as a result of the nature of the wars, their impact on the capital cities, and their effect on the wider population. This was hard not to notice, even for a bookish historian of the 19th century who was just there to read in archives and libraries. But as I walked through central Freetown, white Land Cruisers would speed by on their way from meetings in town to patties for evening drinks and leaving parties, where people who spent their days working on education or trade policy, on assisting the government in achieving economic growth, would regale newcomers with stories of their time in the field in Afghanistan or Somalia. And looking for an internet connection in Monrovia, I would use the Royal Grand Hotel's restaurant lounge, alongside dozens of other expats who were there to discuss capacity building, Millennium Development Goals, and deliverables over 20-pound sushi. But what struck me most of all was not the differences between the two countries, but the sameness of the international community I was seeing in both places, outside and inside the archives. For centuries, Africa has drawn the attention of Westerners full of good intentions, people who want to come and help, and particularly people concerned about Africa's poverty, lack of economic development, and even integration into the global economy. The international economists, aid workers, and development experts who were everywhere in Freetown in 2008 had their predecessors in the Washington Consensus reformers of the 1980s, who sought to increase African economic growth
Sample complete. Ready to continue?